Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's story, if you love tales of unstoppable humans with legendary predator allies tearing through alien assassins in hostile worlds, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment about what predator you'd bond with, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss our next human domination chapter. Now let's begin. Snow fell in silent sheets across the frozen plains of Orith Prime, masking the bones of trees stripped bare by centuries of wind. Pale twilight lingered over the ridges, painting the landscape in violet and blue as if the world itself was holding its breath. Dorian Hale walked alone through drifts that rose to his knees, his boots crunching over frost-caked roots, his long dark coat lined with adaptive thermal mesh that flickered with faint camo patterns to match each terrain shadow he passed. His breath fogged in the air, dissipating instantly in the sub-zero winds. He paused near a jagged outcrop to scan the horizon through his visor's infrared overlay. Sparse heat signatures flickered, burrowing frost moles, a distant herding pack of shagback grazers, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet the hair at the back of his neck prickled with instinctual tension. Former Special Forces operators carried that gut sense forever. It was why most of them died old, not young. Orith Prime was beautiful in its cruelty. The planet's orbital glow revealed glaciers cracked like shattered glass, steam vents exhaling sulfurous plumes in the valleys below. Most humans came here for the rare mineral veins beneath the crust, but Dorian had come for silence. Silence and penance. He never liked thinking about the latter. A low rumble echoed from behind him, vibrating faintly in his ribs. Turning, he saw his companion emerge from the swirling snow. Massive paws padded forward with preternatural grace, leaving wide depressions in the powder. Kale, the snow lion, moved like living shadow given muscle and bone. His fur was a dense, rippling cascade of white streaked with silver ash, a thick mane framing his regal face and concealing the reinforced bioarmor plates mounted along his shoulders and chest. Saber fangs protruded from his upper jaw, curved like ivory scimitars, glistening with frost. His eyes glowed with bioluminescent cobalt, flickering each time his pupils narrowed to track the smallest motion. Dorian crouched, placing a gloved hand against Kale's massive neck. Heat radiated through thick fur, reminding him of why nights never felt quite as cold. The snow lion huffed softly, a plume of warm vapor enveloping Dorian's face with the faint scent of iron and wild musk. "Easy, big guy," Dorian murmured, voice barely audible over the wind. "You sense it too, don't you?" Kale's ears flicked backward, then forward, scanning. He lowered his head, inhaling deeply across the crusted snow. His growl deepened, resonating like distant thunder. Dorian stood, following his companion's gaze until he spotted it. Tracks. Not the staggered plod of grazing shagbacks or the needlepoint pattern of frostmole colonies. These were humanoid. Sleek, three-toed impressions with claw-tipped ends. And deliberate. The spacing suggested careful weight distribution to minimize sinking depth, classic infiltration gait. Dorian's lips tightened. No miner, no poacher moved like that. Only killers. He knelt by the footprints, activating his wrist console to run rapid scans. Trace plasma residue clung to a nearby tree, seared in a tight quarter-sized impact pattern. He rolled his shoulders beneath his armored coat, feeling the tension knot across scar tissue lining his back. "Assassins," he whispered. Kale rumbled again, the sound low and dangerous. The snow lion shifted his massive body, muscles coiling beneath thick fur. Even at rest, he projected lethal grace. Dorian reached up to scratch just behind Kale's ear, feeling the feline's head tilt slightly into the touch. "It's been a while since someone came for us, he said. Kale blinked slowly, his breath steaming in patient acceptance of what they both knew came next. Dorian rose, checking his weapon systematically. His matte black rifle hung across his chest, magnetically locked to a shoulder harness for rapid draw. Sidearm and thigh holster, two vibroblades sheathed along his calves, thermal grenades clipped beneath his cloak folds. Every motion was practiced, silent, devoid of wasted energy. His visor highlighted the footprints' direction, mapping them toward the northern gorge. He remembered the terrain well, narrow passageways hemmed in by sheer ice walls, ideal for an ambush or a counter-ambush. He allowed himself the faintest smile. If they wanted to hunt him on his own territory, they'd bleed for it. Snow whirled around them in sudden gusts. Kale's mane rippled like a living banner, his tail sweeping wide arcs behind him. The snow lion lowered his head beside Dorian's thigh, pressing gently as if to say, "I am with you." Dorian reached down and tapped his muzzle. "Stay close. When we strike together." Kale's jaws opened in a silent snarl, exposing fangs the length of Dorian's forearm. Saliva froze instantly upon contact with the wind, flecking into crystals that drifted to the ground like shards of glass. Dorian moved forward, following the tracks northward through the drifting snowfall. His breath remained calm and measured, every exhale disciplined to avoid fogging his visor optics. Each step pressed deeper into silence, the world narrowing to instinct and purpose. Half a kilometer ahead, the footprints veered off into a craggy gorge mouth, partially obscured by wind-driven drifts. Dorian knelt at the entrance, fingers brushing the icy rock. Cale padded to his side, lowering his enormous head to sniff the stone, tongue flicking out to taste faint molecules of scent the human could never perceive. Cale's mane bristled. Dorian's visor flickered an alert. Microtemperature deviation ahead. Heat signatures. Faint but undeniable. His heart rate barely increased. The assassins were here. They'd laid a trap, unaware that he already knew. He flicked his wrist console, cueing remote mine activation codes for later use. Cale's eyes narrowed to burning slits. His rumble this time was thunderous, reverberating across the gorge walls in a low vibrating growl that raised the tiny hairs along Dorian's arms. The snow lion's breath washed over his face, hot and wild. Dorian drew his rifle from its harness and checked the plasma charge levels. He flicked the safety off and chambered a round with a smooth mechanical clack that echoed through the gorge like a promise of violence to come. Then he glanced sideways at his companion, feeling that old familiar flicker of cold adrenaline swirl with something warmer. "Ready for the hunt, old friend?" he whispered. Cale rumbled again, lowering his body into a silent, predatory crouch. His eyes glowed bright enough to cast shadows in the snow beneath his paws. The wind roared above them, shaking powder loose from the cliffs. Far ahead, unseen but certain, death waited in quiet patience. But death was not always the final hunter on Orith Prime. Sometimes, it merely cleared the field for something far more ancient. And as Dorian took his first step into the waiting darkness, Cale padded beside him with silent, regal menace, each pawfall a whispered promise of blood and ice. Snow crunched beneath Dorian's boots as he moved deeper into the gorge, each step precise and silent despite the icy rubble underfoot. The shadows here were thicker, pooling between jagged ice walls like spilled ink. Overhead, the wind howled through narrow crevices, carrying flurries of crystalline snowflakes that danced briefly in the dim twilight before vanishing into the drifting gloom. Cale stayed close beside him, his massive form melding with the shadows, moving with silent predatory grace. Every few paces the snow lion would pause, lowering his head to taste the air, mane bristling and fangs twitching as he tested each scent. His bioluminescent eyes flickered dimly, adjusted for stealth, though their cobalt glow still burned like embers in the dark. Dorian halted at a bend where the gorge narrowed to a corridor barely wide enough for Cale's shoulders. He crouched low, scanning ahead with his visor. The infrared overlay painted stark images. Faint heat blooms in the distance, 3 in total, stationary but restless. Each flickered with the irregular pulse of living things armored against the cold. His lips thinned into a cold smile. He tapped Cale's chest softly with 2 fingers. The lion's ears flicked backward in silent acknowledgement. They moved forward, every muscle coiled for violence. Dorian's pulse remained calm, his mind focused only on distances, trajectories, and death. He reached for a smooth black cylinder clipped to his belt and activated its priming switch with a thumb press. The thermal grenade hummed faintly in his gloved palm, micro-indicators along its side pulsing green. He leaned sideways to whisper, so quietly the words barely formed vapor in the frozen air. Flash and flank. Cale's jaws opened slightly, fangs gleaming in anticipation, breath misting over Dorian's shoulder. He counted down in his head. 3, 2, 1. With a swift flick, he hurled the grenade down the corridor. It bounced once, twice, and detonated with a muted thump. Blinding white thermal light erupted across the narrow gorge, flooding every shadow with searing brilliance and casting long, twisting silhouettes of 3 armored figures caught mid-step. The assassins reacted instantly, raising sleek plasma rifles toward the source. But Cale was already moving. The snow lion launched himself forward, covering 20 meters in a single bound, his claws biting into ice for traction as he crashed into the nearest assassin with a roar that shook the gorge walls. Dorian moved in parallel, rolling to cover behind a jagged boulder as plasma bolts seared through the air where he'd stood seconds before. Cale's roar became a thunderous snarl as his jaws clamped down on the assassin's armored chest. The exosuit crumpled under the crushing force of 4-ton feline jaws, splintering composite plates like brittle shell. The alien's scream cut short as Kale shook his massive head once, violently, before releasing the corpse to collapse limply into the snow. The second assassin pivoted toward Kale, raising a plasma knife with insectoid precision. Its clawed feet scraped over ice as it lunged in a blurred arc aimed at Kale's exposed flank. But Dorian was already moving, rifle raised. His fingers squeezed the trigger 3 times in rapid succession, each suppressed shot a mere whisper against the thunder of Kale's snarls. The plasma rounds punched through the alien's thigh joint, hip actuator, and finally its throat seal. Dark fluid sprayed into the snow as it collapsed, limbs twitching spasmodically. Dorian shifted his stance, pivoting smoothly to scan for the third assassin. But there was only silence and drifting snow. He swept his rifle barrel in tight arcs, scanning every thermal flicker, every motion of the swirling flakes. The heat bloom had vanished. Kale growled low in warning, mane bristling along his armored spine. Dorian spun just in time to see a shimmer of distortion resolve into solid form behind him. The final assassin decloaked mid-lunge, wielding an energy spear crackling with violet arcs. Its armored limbs flexed with biomechanical strength as it drove the spear toward Dorian's chest. He barely twisted aside. The spear sliced a burning groove across his left bicep, searing through coat, armor mesh, and flesh in a single hiss of vaporized blood. Pain flared bright and hot, sending a shockwave through his senses. He grunted, dropping to one knee, the rifle slipping from his grip to clatter against the frozen stone. Kale roared in fury, lunging forward with claws outstretched, but the assassin moved like liquid shadow. Its insectoid limbs blurred with inhuman agility as it spun away from Kale's strike, striking the snow lion across the flank with the spear's haft in a hammering blow that would have shattered bones in a lesser creature. Kale snarled in pain and rage, massive paws skidding over ice as he regrouped. The assassin retracted its spear into a compact staff and flicked a hidden blade from its gauntlet. It advanced on Dorian, clicking mandibles hidden beneath its armored helm as it raised the blade for a finishing thrust. Its body flickered with active camo, blurring in and out of visibility as it moved. Dorian's vision wavered with pain and adrenaline. Blood soaked his coat sleeve, freezing rapidly against the outer fabric. But his mind remained cold and clear. He shifted his weight subtly, fingers finding the vibroblade sheathed against his thigh. As the assassin lunged, Dorian rolled into its strike, twisting sideways to let the blade scrape harmlessly across his chest plate before driving his own blade upward with all his strength. The vibroblade punched into the alien's side joint, severing biotubing and slicing deep into its internal organ cluster. Its chittering scream rose to a high, keening frequency that stabbed through the gorge. Dorian twisted the blade and ripped it free, feeling the armored plates part beneath his grip. The assassin staggered back, clicking spasmodically, dark internal fluids pumping from the wound. Kale did not wait. With a roar that shook loose icicles from the gorge walls, he surged forward and struck. Massive claws slammed the assassin to the ground, pinning its limbs while Kale's saber fangs pierced its helm in a single savage bite. The alien shuddered once before falling limp beneath him. Snow fell in sudden quiet, drifting around the corpses. Dorian gasped, his breath ragged in the freezing air, every exhale painting bloody fog against his cracked visor. Kale turned to him, eyes glowing bright in concern. The lion lowered his massive head and pressed it gently against Dorian's chest, rumbling low in protective worry. Dorian exhaled shakily, reaching up with his uninjured arm to grasp a handful of Kale's mane. The warmth there steadied him, anchored him against the trembling that wanted to take his limbs. "Good boy," he whispered, voice rough with pain and relief. "Good boy." Kale rumbled again, a low sound of pride and lingering fury. Snow swirled around them in silent curtains, covering blood and broken armor alike. The gorge remained quiet, only the wind singing its lonely song across the heights. Dorian closed his eyes briefly, letting his heart rate slow. The assassins had come prepared. Cloaking fields, plasma blades, infiltration tactics tailored for human prey. They had known his patrol route. They had known his skill. And still they underestimated him. They always did. He flexed his injured arm experimentally, feeling pain lance down to his fingertips. The burn would slow him, but it would not stop him. Nothing would stop him while Kale still breathed at his side. He rose slowly, leaning into Kale's massive shoulder for support before straightening fully. The snow lion turned his great head to nuzzle Dorian's chest softly, mindful of his wounds. Dorian rested his forehead against Kale's, feeling the hot breath against his cheek, feeling the life there, the bond that was older than any creed or uniform. he whispered, so softly only Kale could hear over the sighing winds. They sent assassins today. Next time it'll be worse. We'll be ready, won't we? Kale's tail swished through the snow, sending up plumes of powder that glittered in the faint twilight. His eyes burned with ancient wild certainty. Dorian's lips curved faintly despite the pain splitting his arm. Snow drifted between them, settling on Kale's mane, catching in Dorian's stubble. The cold pressed in from all sides, vast and eternal, but together they stood unbowed. Beyond the gorge, the frozen plains of Orith Prime stretched out under the alien sky, silent and waiting. Dorian exhaled once, steadying himself, then turned toward the north where shadows gathered thickest. He knew they were not done. And neither was he. The wind moaned across the gorge as Dorian moved northward with Kale at his side, each footstep a testament to his willpower against the pain gnawing through his injured arm. Blood had crusted and frozen where plasma had sliced flesh, turning the edge of his sleeve into rigid, darkened ice. Still, he pressed on, rifle clutched tightly in his good hand, scanning each shadow for threats his visor might not detect. Kale moved with silent vigilance, shoulders rippling beneath his ash-streaked mane, eyes flickering with lethal blue light as he scanned every rock formation, every drift of snow that might conceal another assassin. Dorian glanced at him, drawing silent strength from his companion's presence. The bond between them was deeper than words. It was forged in violence, tempered in loyalty, and held together by the simple promise that neither would ever abandon the other. Ahead, the gorge widened into a basin of shattered ice boulders and ancient petrified trees, their twisted trunks jutting skyward like the bones of long-dead titans. The alien twilight deepened as wind-driven clouds swallowed what remained of the sun, cloaking the landscape in flickering shadows tinged blue and silver. Dorian crouched behind a broad slab of ice to rest for a moment, his breath harsh and ragged in his throat. Kale lowered his great head to nuzzle his side gently, mindful of the blood crusted there. "I'm fine," Dorian whispered, though pain lanced from shoulder to wrist with every pulse of his heart. He forced himself to inhale slowly, grounding his senses on the biting cold, the clean wild scent of Kale's mane, and the faint hum of his rifle's charged capacitor. He could not afford distraction now. If there were 3 assassins, there could be more. The Ruvar never left a kill to chance. Kale's ears flicked forward suddenly, mane bristling. His rumble was low and thunderous, echoing across the basin like the distant growl of an approaching storm. Dorian followed his gaze and felt his gut tighten. On the far side of the basin, movement resolved from the drifting snow. Not one figure but 3. They moved with inhuman grace, limbs long and armored in segmented exosuits that flickered with active camo patterns. Their leader stood slightly ahead, taller than the others, clad in blackened plates etched with silver sigils. Even at this distance, Dorian could feel the killer's focus fixed upon him like a blade pressed to his throat. He raised his visor's magnification, targeting the leader's helmet. 4 compound eyes glowed red from beneath its armored hood, mandibles flexing in subtle, insectoid anticipation. In its clawed hand it held a massive glaive, the blade humming with violet plasma arcs that hissed and crackled against the falling snow. This was no scout or disposable killer. This was Vree, an elite Ruvar enforcer whose bounties were whispered about even within human Black Ops briefings. Kale lowered his body, his massive shoulders rolling forward, claws unsheathed and digging into the frozen ground with scraping crunches. His tail lashed once, sending up plumes of powder as his fangs bared in a silent snarl. Dorian drew a slow breath and rose to his feet, rifle held at ready. His left arm burned with fresh agony at the movement, but he forced the pain down, locking it in a cage at the back of his mind. Pain was information. Pain was fuel. Pain reminded him he was still alive. The assassins advanced, moving with perfect formation, spreading out to encircle him. Vree spoke in a voice that buzzed and clicked through the external amplifiers of his helm. "Human Ranger. Your territory is forfeit. Your life is unnecessary." Dorian's lips curled in a faint, cold smile. He reached up with his good hand to toggle his visor's external speaker. "Then come and take it." Vree tilted his head slightly, mandibles flexing in what might have been amusement. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the 2 assassins flanking him into motion. They sprang forward in a blur of speed, plasma blades igniting in each clawed hand. Kale erupted from his crouch like an avalanche given muscle and teeth. His roar thundered across the basin, deafening in its fury, as he crashed into the first assassin with enough force to crack ice beneath their bodies. Massive paws slammed the alien to the ground as Kale's saber fangs pierced its chest plate, splitting composite armor like brittle shell. Blood and hydraulic fluid sprayed in steaming arcs as Kale tore his head sideways, ripping the assassin's torso open in a single savage motion. Dorian pivoted smoothly as the second assassin lunged at his exposed flank. His rifle barked twice, plasma rounds punching through the assassin's knee joint and then its shoulder actuator. It stumbled, limbs spasming, but managed to slash out with its blade, scoring a shallow cut across Dorian's thigh armor. Dorian grunted at the impact, then brought his rifle up in a brutal underhook, smashing the reinforced barrel into the assassin's throat joint with a metallic crack that sent it sprawling back, choking on severed tubing. Before it could recover, Kale pounced, crushing its chest beneath one massive paw and ending its struggles with a bone-snapping bite to the head. But Vree was already moving. The enforcer charged with blinding speed, his massive glaive sweeping out in a violet arc that blurred through the snow. Dorian barely twisted aside. The blade screamed past his chest, the plasma edge carving a searing line through his armored coat, narrowly missing flesh. Vree's other hand slammed into his injured arm with crushing force, sending agony detonating through his nerves. He staggered back, nearly dropping his rifle. The enforcer pressed forward, glaive spinning in tight, deadly arcs that forced Dorian onto the defensive, each strike only narrowly deflected by desperate parries with his rifle's reinforced barrel. Kale roared and lunged to intercept, jaws gaping to bite down on Vree's exposed side. But the assassin spun with impossible speed, slamming the glaive's haft into Kale's muzzle with a concussive crack that sent the snow lion skidding sideways across the ice, stunned but not defeated. Vree did not pause. He pressed forward, glaive flickering as it carved shallow gashes across Dorian's chest and abdomen. Sparks sprayed with each impact, the burning edges slicing through outer armor mesh to sear the protective plates beneath. Dorian's vision wavered, red warnings flickering across his visor's HUD. Pain hammered at his senses, threatening to drag him down into darkness. He forced himself to remain upright, focusing not on the agony but on Vree's movements. The assassin was fast, impossibly so, but arrogant. Confident in victory. Confident enough to ignore Kale as a wounded beast, irrelevant to his kill. With a growl of rising fury, Dorian shifted his stance, feinting a desperate retreat. Vree lunged forward, glaive raised for a decapitating strike. At that precise instant, Kale rose from where he had fallen, eyes blazing with primal rage. The snow lion launched himself forward with earth-shaking power, jaws gaping wide as he collided with Vree's back in a blur of fur, fangs and rippling muscle. The assassin stumbled, driven forward by Kale's mass. His glaive strike went wide, slashing harmlessly through empty air as Kale's saber fangs clamped down on his armored neck. Composite plating cracked and buckled beneath those impossibly powerful jaws. Vree screamed, mandibles clicking in fury as he tried to twist free. But Kale's grip tightened, fangs sinking deeper, crushing metal and bone beneath them with the inexorable force of ancient wild predators. Dorian stepped forward, rifle raised one-handed. Vree's compound eyes flicked toward him, red lenses flickering with rage and the dawning realization of defeat. Dorian's finger tightened on the trigger. The plasma bolt punched through Vree's exposed eye cluster in a spray of shattering glass and liquefied organic matter. The assassin's body convulsed once in Kale's jaws before going limp. Kale held the corpse a moment longer, growling deep in his chest before releasing it to collapse heavily into the snow. The snow lion stood panting, hot breath steaming in ragged plumes as his glowing eyes locked onto Dorian's. He rumbled softly, head lowering to nudge his human's chest with careful insistence, checking for injury, for life, for presence. Dorian let his rifle lower to his side. Blood seeped slowly down his arm and thigh, dripping into the snow in small dark flecks. Pain roared through him like a storm, but beneath it burned cold victory, bright and quiet. He reached up to grasp Kale's thick mane, fingers curling in familiar warmth. "Well done," he whispered, voice ragged but resolute. "Well done, brother." Kale's purr rumbled deep in his chest, vibrating through Dorian's bones like a healing chant. Snow fell softly around them, settling over broken corpses and spilled fluids, cloaking death in silent purity. Dorian turned his gaze northward, where the gorge widened into an open frozen plain, the horizon stretching far beyond sight. They had survived. But this was only the beginning. The sky above Orith Prime bled into dawn with agonizing slowness, pale orange streaks mingling with cobalt shadows as the wind fell quiet over the frozen basin. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the death-scented stillness. Dorian stood in the midst of it all, his injured arm heavy against his side, rifle clutched in his good hand, eyes fixed on the horizon where the first touch of morning illuminated jagged cliffs in a muted amber glow. Kale pressed close beside him, the snow lion's massive shoulder brushing against his hip with protective insistence. Blood still matted Kale's mane near his neck where Vria's glaive had struck a glancing blow, but the lion held his head high, eyes blazing with cobalt fire as he scanned the silent field for any further threat. His tail flicked with restless vigilance, sweeping arcs through the drifting snow. Dorian shifted his grip on the rifle and slowly lowered it, feeling the last threads of adrenaline fade from his veins, leaving only a cold, clear exhaustion in their place. His wounds burned with a dull, throbbing ache, but the pain felt distant, almost unreal beneath the quiet triumph that steadied his pulse. Kale rumbled low, turning his great head to nuzzle Dorian's chest with gentle pressure. The snow lion's breath washed over him, warm and wild, laced with the metallic tang of spilled blood. Dorian raised his uninjured hand to scratch behind Kale's ear, feeling the thick fur part beneath his fingers, feeling the pulse of life and loyalty beneath. "Still with me, big guy?" he whispered. Kale blinked slowly, pressing harder against him in silent answer. Dorian smiled faintly, though his lips trembled with fatigue. He let his eyes drift across the basin, taking in the broken armored corpses half buried beneath fresh snow, the scorched gouges where plasma blades had carved through stone and ice, the splintered fragments of Vria's shattered glaive still crackling faintly with dying energy. The dawn light caught the edges of Kale's saber fangs, painting them gold like regal crowns. For a brief moment in that silent stillness, the world felt almost holy. He toggled his visor's communication uplink, patching through to planetary command. Static hissed before a voice crackled into his ear. "Ranger Hale. We lost telemetry on your signal. Status report." Dorian exhaled slowly, voice low and measured. "Threat neutralized. Ruvar assassination squad eliminated. Possible corporate bounty behind it. Recommend orbital scans for inbound craft. I'll submit a full report upon return." "Understood, Ranger Hale. Extraction team en route if needed." "Negative," he said, glancing at Kale as the snow lion rumbled softly. "I'll make my own way back." He cut the channel and let silence settle over him once more. Kale's glowing eyes locked onto his, filled with wordless intelligence and something deeper, something older than language. Loyalty unbreakable. Bond unyielding. The snow lion huffed softly and turned his gaze eastward toward the rising sun. Dorian followed that gaze, feeling each pulse of blood in his veins as a reminder of why he was here. Why he had left the Black Ops halls of Earth's militarized corporations. Why he had traded war for wilderness, command for solitude, uniform for unclaimed snows. He crouched, fingers curling into Kale's mane as he pressed his forehead against the lion's massive skull. For a moment he closed his eyes, letting the rumble of Kale's purr ground him. Memories flickered behind his eyelids. His old squad screaming through comms as plasma fire tore their convoy apart in a dust storm on Garrel 9. Pulling Kale from a slaver's trap as a half-starved cub, fangs too small then to even pierce leather gloves. Nights spent staring into alien skies, wondering if purpose and peace were ever the same thing. He drew a deep breath, exhaling mist that drifted away into the sunrise. "I didn't leave war to find peace," he whispered. "I left to fight for something worth dying for." Kale's ears flicked at the sound of his voice, and he rumbled softly, pressing harder against Dorian's chest. The snow lion's mane brushed his cheek with its wild, musky warmth. Dorian rose slowly, ignoring the screaming protests of his muscles, and slung his rifle across his back. He scanned the horizon one last time before stepping forward. Kale matched him stride for stride, paws crunching into untouched drifts, tail curling upward in regal arcs as he moved. Dawn spread across the ice plains, bleeding gold and crimson into every drifting flake, illuminating the snow lion's mane until it glowed like molten silver. The wind rose again, colder but gentler, carrying away the last sense of death into the endless wastes. They walked together through the rising light, leaving behind shattered assassins and blood-stained snow. Ahead lay an uncertain path, threats unspoken, promises unbroken. Each step pressed into the world a silent declaration, that here on Orith Prime, life belonged to those who had the strength to claim it. Dorian paused once, glancing sideways at his companion. Kale turned his massive head and stared back, cobalt eyes burning with the quiet certainty of a predator that feared nothing under sky or stars. Dorian reached up, curling his fingers into the thick fur along Kale's cheek, feeling heat and heartbeat beneath. "Let them come," he whispered. Kale rumbled low, deep as thunder rolling across glaciers, a sound that made the drifting snow tremble around them. The snow lion pressed his forehead against Dorian's, fangs glinting in dawn's first brilliance, breath steaming in clouds that rose together into the awakening sky. The wind swept around them, carrying away blood scent and alien death. In the silent promise between human and beast, between ranger and lion, lay a bond stronger than war, older than language, and more enduring than any crown or creed. And as the sun rose over Orith Prime, the snow lion and his human ranger walked forward into its blazing light, leaving death behind them to freeze beneath the endless snows. Because on this world the cold did not claim the strongest. It knelt to them.